All right. Good morning. It is Tuesday, April the 27th, and we are about to begin our regular council meeting. I'd like to remind everybody that all public meetings are live streamed and recorded. Any verbal or written information provided may be included in public documents as per the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, FOIP 41. We're calling the meeting to order at 9 o'clock. Looking to adopt the agenda. Councillor Lang. Those in favor? That's carried. Looking to adopt the meeting minutes, 3.1, from the regular council meeting of April the 13th. Any errors or omissions? Looking to adopt those. Councillor Duncan. Those in favor? That is carried. That brings us to 3.2. The special council meeting, looking to adopt the meeting minutes from April the 20th. Councillor Swanson. Those in favor? That is carried. That brings us to 4.1, Planning and Development. Mr.
Thank you.
Reyes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Council.
Good morning.
Before you is Bylaw 1103/20, which intends to, 1, add a new district to the county's land use bylaw, being the Clear Creek and North Raven River Buffer District, and 2, to redesignate 53 quarter sections from the Agriculture District to the new district. The applicant is Victor Benz on behalf of the Alberta Fish and Game Association. The land proposed to be redesignated is located approximately 10 kilometers northeast of the village of Caroline, east of Highway 22. The land is currently zoned agriculture. According to the applicants, the North Raven River and Clear Creek are ecologically unique and environmentally sensitive spring-fed watercourses. Given their sensitivity, they believe that a 1.8 kilometer buffer around the headwater springs are needed to protect this area. The proposed district is similar to the agriculture district, with the exception that it prohibits any resource extraction below the water table in the subject area. It also includes development requirements such as 1, no discretionary use development shall create an open water body such as a pond or a lake other than dugouts. 2, no discretionary use development shall permit any potentially harmful material to be deposited in the soil above the normal seasonal maximum water table or in the aquifer below the water table. 3, the Municipal Planning Commission may decide to hold a public hearing for an application. And 4, all discretionary use development applications shall include a full environmental assessment report on the development's potential impact on the headwater springs of Clear Creek and the North Raven River. The following shall be considered by Council when reviewing this application. 1, the applicant has not presented proof of consent from all property owners. The applicants do own 2 properties in the area consisting of 142 acres. Usually, a redesignation of this magnitude starts with an overall arching policy in a municipal development plan. Council should note that some potential legal challenges may arise if this redesignation is approved, as no consent from all property owners has been obtained. 2, the applicant has not provided site-specific hydrological studies that demonstrate that a 1.8 kilometer buffer is needed to protect the headwater springs of the Clear Creek and North Raven River. Some information provided by the applicant is based on research conducted mostly in the United States. And 3, if the proposed land use bylaw is approved and the land is redesignated, it will prohibit gravel extraction in a large area of the county. It will also open the possibility of redesignating similar areas within the county. Currently, the county has very strong policies regarding the protection of environmentally significant areas, as shown in the report that's presented to you. Any development application will have to meet these policies as part of the review process. Based on the information submitted by the applicant, planning staff cannot properly evaluate this application. As a result, it recommends that Council refuse the application or defeat first reading of Bylaw 1103/20. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any questions or comments? Councillor Swanson?
Yeah, I've had a few phone calls this past weekend in regards to this, and there are more proponents of the land use bylaw, or sorry, the bylaw that we are contemplating, because they're seeing it as a protection. They're not seeing it as an overarching, like you said, Jose, in regards to policy, we don't have a policy to follow, etc. But they did indicate that there is a reputation that area, special reputation that area holds. And so in order to try and protect that area in the future, in regards to the brown trout, et cetera, they were telling me that, you know, they get anywhere between 2,200 and 2,500 people a year that come from all over the world to fish. I mean, unfortunately, COVID has stopped that last year, but so I guess for me, I know it's unprecedented, but there's got to be a way. This is a unique area. There's got to be a way if we can. How many? If we haven't received written consent from all the property owners, how many are we missing? Or what percentage are we at? Or are they at?
All of them, basically. Just the association is the only one that signed the document,
Okay.
the actual form, but all of the property owners, except the association, are missing.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Lang?
Well, I have quite a few questions and I have some comments. I guess I'll start with my questions here. On the second page where it has the what's listed, like no discretionary use, development shall create either a temporary or permanent open water body, or no discretionary use of development, and any potentially harmful material, all those things that are listed. Does that come from the MGA?
Mr. Reyes?
No, that's basically what was drafted by the applicant. Those sections were drafted by the applicant as part of the bylaw they submitted.
By the applicant?
Yes.
Because right before that, it says a proposed new district is similar to the ag district, with the exception that it prohibits any resource extraction below the water table in the subject area. It also includes development requirements such as, and then that's listed. That's from the applicant?
That's from the applicant, that's correct.
Oh, okay. There's something that hit me, and it talks about that there will be no discretionary use development shall permit any potentially harmful material to be deposited in the soil. Would that even be like fertilizer for farmers? Would that be considered potentially harmful material?
It may be. It may be.
Maybe.
Depending on the type, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can understand why some of the landowners may be opposed to this, or they need more information. But I also understand the other side of the story of this being a special area, and what Councillor Swanson had indicated. I listened this morning to a presentation by Dr. Rick Hauer, and he's a university professor from Montana, and he's the presentation I listened to is what is a gravel bed river and why do they matter? And it was very interesting. And it talked about the preservation of these streams and these rivers and the underground chutes and the up channels and how the interaction between the subsurface water and the groundwater, that it's absolutely essential to maintain the aquatic life and the fish. So when you look at it from that perspective, I'm kind of thinking gravel extraction below the water table in this area is not wise. Anyways, I'm just gonna leave it at that.
While we're contemplating this, Councillor Duncan?
One question, what happens if there's an approval for a gravel extraction above the water table, but then water accumulates there? And that could happen, I guess, either from perhaps spring runoff or heavy rains, or perhaps even a rising water table. Is there regulation or conditions in place typically that, because I know we have, there are a number of gravel pits down there, and we have turned some down that ask for, permits below the water table. I just wondered if there's, what happens in cases like that when water starts to interact there?
And, I believe that will be addressed at the development permit application. That's when they have to provide all the studies and how they're going to mitigate any leakage.
Okay. I guess I'll continue with a few comments. I read through the study again here that the Fish and Game Association provided, and I'm actually not too bad with the science they have there. I understand how they came up with a 1.8 kilometer buffer. There is, unfortunately, yes, we don't have site-specific information for that. There has been a lot of work done in this area to preserve it. The $10 million that's been invested along the Raven River itself. One of the questions I do have is that in the study here, all the information provided, and there was lots of testing done back in the day, but all the data that's provided on some of the potential pollutants or chemicals and stuff is, the last data is actually 2001 was the newest, and most of it is from the 90s. So it would be good if some of that data was updated, and it would provide us some more background. I know this is good baseline data, but there has been a lot of restoration work done since then. There has been a lot of probably acreages approved since then. Acreages are never decreasing in the county. There's the odd farmstead that might disappear, but one of the things cited in this report was the potential for contamination of nitrates and fecal coliform from sewers as well. So I think that is not very well understood either. I guess the other point I would make here is that for me, it's still a little bit out of line with our review of the MDP and the land use bylaw. We have a proposal before us to change gravel from discretionary ag to a control district that council would oversee. And, I would not quite sure I understand, and maybe that could be explained a bit of what would happen. For me, that should be done before the land use bylaw is changed, because we may not want the same, I think we might end up going back and making changes again if we approve this one today as it is. I'm not sure I quite understand if that's what would happen there. We do, as Mr. Reyes has pointed out, we do have some fairly strong ways to protect the land right now. We have not approved wet pits in this area, to my knowledge, and I can look for confirmation, I guess, but unless there's some old existing ones, and we do have the ability to not. And I agree that without the proper studies, we shouldn't be doing this. But I also think, there has been some studies done, but to me, this work is more geared towards a WPAC or somebody else overseeing this. It's not really, there's always a question if the developer does it or if the county does it, is that done in the best interest of the correct answer in science, or is it would it be better to have these studies done by a third party that's has no stake? So anyway, that's, I think that needs to be investigated as well, and have some time to provide some more information in the future on that. I'll leave it at that for now until we discuss further. Unless Mr. Reyes would...
Maybe I'll expand a little bit on that. Yeah, absolutely. We are not disputing the need to protect this area. We have the policies to regulate any development in the future. We recognize this area as very sensitive. What we are challenged is with the process. We don't have support from all property owners. We don't have the specific studies, and that's where the challenge is.
Thank you. Councillor Lougheed?
I think you answered part of my question already, but I will ask this, is currently on our agriculturally zoned land, do we have any development permits or restrictions around the development of a dugout or a roadway or clearing of brush or stacking of manure? Do we have anything around that on agricultural land?
I believe we don't know.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Lang?
So I'm thinking of the landowners, have they had the opportunity to get educated and informed about the sensitivity of this area? Has anyone reached out to them?
Mr. Reyes?
In the package that was presented to planning, the applicant has reached out at the property owners, and they have had some discussions, but they didn't sign the form. That's the problem, because some of them didn't want to upset the neighbors, or because we're limiting development in the future for this area, so they didn't want to enter into conflicts with neighbors, and that's the reason why I understand they didn't want to sign the form.
Councillor Hoven?
First of all, I'd like to thank my fellow councillors for the insightful discussion we're having this morning on this. I think everyone here, you know, if we think about the discussion of coal out in the West Country, you know, people in Clearwater County are very concerned about the environment. And when I think about these 11 quarter sections that are environmentally sensitive, it's the same type of thing. People care about the environment, we care about the land, and we want to protect that land for future generations. I share the concern about the process. We are currently doing the MDP review. We will be doing another land use bylaw review when the MDP is completed, and now we're considering an amendment to the land use bylaw kind of in the middle of it all. And I think we might be things might get crossed when we're going like this. Another one of my concerns is the landowner's opinion. I don't know how many landowners there are in those 33 quarter sections, but I would like to see an anonymous survey of those landowners to get their opinion of it. Because if we do not have the landowner's support, I don't think we can do it. I'd also like to see some type of a survey for all the residents of Clearwater County, so we can get an understanding of where our residents stand when it comes to protecting environmentally sensitive areas. Because right now we're just going in on letters and stuff we received about coal. I'd like to see a survey really asking some tough questions of residents. What do you want? How do you want this community to be? So as to how we move forward today, well, I'd like to say, first of all, that we are never going to get enough data. There's never going to be enough information. But I really don't think we have enough to move forward as of today. So I guess I'm asking my fellow councillors, is it best to perhaps, well, I guess you could table this, we could vote this down and then focus back on the MDP and get residents' information for that, and then we include that in the next draft of the MDP. Because if we step out of process, we're going to be creating more problems in the future. So I think we need to just, even though I think everyone is in support of doing something, we need to make sure we're doing it the right way.
Councillor Lang?
Oh, sorry.
Well, there's a lot to absorb there. For myself, I was quickly looking at this, and it looks like not only are there 33-quarter sections that's affected, it looks like there's 11 or 12 acreages in here as well. So that's a number of folks. Do we know how many residents live in this area? Mr. Reyes?
No, we don't.
Okay. So my understanding, and perhaps you can confirm this for me, is so far the landowners have had limited consultation. If, like, it sounds like there was some conversations, but it was a little bit limited, or we're not sure.
I don't know the specifics, but I know they did have some conversations.
But they didn't
With the-
sign off.
They didn't sign off.
Okay. Then the other question is, we know this area is sensitive. We recognize the need to protect it somehow. But we also need to balance that with the owners, the landowners' needs. And their voices can't be lost in this. So that's also important. I know that we haven't done a lot of the science and in this area. Do we know the general depth of the water table? Because this is saying that we're not going to go below the water table. If the water table is close to the surface, we're really saying nothing's ever going to happen again. Mr. Reyes?
No, I don't have the specifics, and that's where site-specific data needs to be provided.
Right. I agree with Councillor Hoven. I struggle with enough information here. I recognize that we are in the middle of a process with the municipal development plan, albeit it's in a much lower gear. COVID has had quite an impact on that. We want to address this, I believe, as part of the land use bylaw. That then brings us, as Councillor Hoven indicated, we have a decision to make. Do we refuse the application? Do we defeat the first reading? Any thoughts or comments on how you'd like to proceed? Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Reeve Laird. To that issue, I would ask Mr. Reyes, if council were to decide to refuse the application, is there anything preventing the association or anyone else from submitting such an application in the future with additional information?
No, there's nothing to prevent them. They can come back with more information after 6 months.
Okay, thank you. So I would ask for council's consideration that that might be a more appropriate course of action than tabling the item, and remind council this item has been tabled once before, so it might provide clearer direction going forward.
And thank you for that clarification. That was where I guess my mind was going. We want to assist the situation and the process to move forward rather than stalling it. We recognize there's decisions that need to be made, there's consultations, there's education process. Councillor Hoven.
A substantial deposit or fee, I guess, was paid for by the Alberta Fish and Game Association. If this is defeated at first reading, what happens to that fee?
That will be refunded fully, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Duncan.
One other question too. The study that the Fish and Game has provided to us, could that be submitted as, if any future applications for gravel pits were put before the MPC or planning department? Could they submit that as a concern? Or is this gonna remain in our files as a concern? It would have to be resubmitted if there was an application, say, for a gravel in
That's
that
correct, they
area.
will have to be resubmitted.
But it could be resubmitted as their,
As a concern, yeah, as a
concern
concern from, yeah, if
from
there is an
them. So
application.
It
They will be
doesn't, it
engaged.
doesn't disappear off, this study could still become part of a consideration by MPC for any gravel in that area. It would, in the future, even if it was defeated today.
Well, I would suggest it's more than just gravel. Any development, this could be looked at, because I see that, there's concerns. If somebody wants to put in a sewer system with a field that may be impacted by this as well. So just making sure that we understand, this is for, you know, they could still submit it for any development in this area. So this information, I agree, doesn't go away. Other questions or comments? If not, we're looking to consider A, refusing the application. And if we refuse it, would they be given a refund?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
All right. Or B, defeating first reading of this bylaw. Councillor Swanson?
What is the cleaner way of, if we defeat the first reading, the application then goes away, or if we defeat, or if we refuse the application, does the bylaw still stay on the books?
Yes, there are two ways, but I would prefer if the bylaw is defeated, so it's off the record.
Okay. Councillor Lougheed?
Sorry, I didn't mean to have my light on.
Okay. Councillor Hoven?
So if the bylaw is defeated, there is nothing stopping us from bringing this forward in our MDP discussions, correct?
That is correct, Councillor.
Okay. If you have a preference, now's when to say it. I guess I'll go, Councillor Hoven?
Well, I will move first reading of bylaw 1103/20.
Thank you. Any further discussion or comments? Seeing none. Those in favor? Those opposed? That is being defeated. 0-7. All right, thank you, Mr. Reyes. I know that this would be good to at least allow the next steps in processes. Thank you. That then brings us to item 5.1, the Stoney First Fire Service Assistance Agreement. Ms. Hager.
Good morning, Reeve Laird, members of council. Before council today, you have another agreement in my list of agreements to check off and modernize. Clearwater County and Stoney Nation have an existing aid agreement related to fire services that was dated back to 1995. I believe printed on a Metrix printer at the date and time it was signed. And administration from the two organizations have met and discussed modernizing the agreement. The draft before you for council's consideration for endorsement was provided by Stoney First Nation, and they have used this draft amongst some of their other partnerships. When administration took a review, the clauses are very similar to other aid-related agreements that Clearwater County has with their neighboring jurisdictions, including providing that fee schedule at the end, which allows for cost recovery for any kind of aid service provided, which then nets back to the regional partnership cost. Would council wish me to go through the agreement in detail or just respond to any questions related to the agreement itself?
I'm thinking just any questions might be just suffice.
Sounds good.
So any comments or questions with regard to this? Councillor Duncan.
Just to confirm, I think it's fairly clear that if a response is if a response is not possible from Norda, given that our fire department is a little smaller there, it could come from Rocky, but it also could be almost like refused, or at least the caveat would be that that's a long response time, and it would be expensive as well because of the extra at least 2 hours, I guess I would say approximately of time taken for Station 60 to respond that far.
Absolutely, and the agreement does provide that limitation of service. It's if we can provide it, if we're already responding to something else. It's not an automatic aid. It's if we're able to provide that response. Generally, we are able to provide that response, but you're right, it could be very well coming out of the Rocky Mountain House Station, which would give them a long response time. But they do have a fire service that they're training and trying to get up to speed in terms of fire service provision, so it would be an assistance to their existing service.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Lougheed?
I guess my question is this fee schedule unique to this agreement, or is that
No,
universal throughout our
yeah,
service?
the fee schedule is actually set on Alberta Transportation's rates for responding. So I believe that is a 2020 fee schedule, but it's consistent with what we've had in other mutual aid agreements, as well the Stoney First Nations agreements that they have with other adjacent municipalities.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Duncan?
Perhaps not entirely pertaining to this agreement, but does the Stoney First Nations have the ability to respond to motor vehicle collisions in their area there?
I don't believe they do.
Okay. And the other question would be is that, have we had many responses out there in the last number of years that you're aware of, or?
I am not aware of any in the last year, but I could certainly go back and take a look through the records. As it stands, we go when they call us in terms of response. We need, without the ask from them to come, we don't automatically respond into that region. But certainly I believe in my recollection in the last few years that there may have been 1 or 2 responses.
Okay,
But
so
I'd have to go back and check the stats. I didn't have that with me.
That's fine. Generally quite a low response from us there anyway, so,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Other questions or comments? If not, we're looking to the staff recommendation. The council endorses the 2021 Fire Services Assistance Agreement between the Stoney Nation and Clearwater County. Deputy Reeve Vandermeer? All those in favor? That is carried 7-0.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. This is been a long time coming, so well done. That brings us to corporate services. 6.1, 2020 accumulated surplus allocations. Do we need a moment? Give Ms. Sherhan a moment to set up. All right, Ms. Sherhan.
Morning.
Good morning. I'm sure you've got great news for us.
I do.
Good.
The first item I have before you is the 2020 accumulated surplus allocations. As discussed at the last strategic planning session, we went through all of the different restricted surplus accounts, and we went through the definition, the history, and the purpose for each of the restricted surplus accounts identified in the financial statements. This exercise solidified projects identified in the county's 10-year capital plan that are utilizing the restricted surplus that past councils have diligently and systematically identified over the last 15 years. Transfers for the 2020 surplus have been identified through budget and during council meetings throughout the year. The list, Appendix A, is provided to you on the screen there and in the agenda package. And draft statements will be coming later on this morning. So the only item that was in addition to the transfers that we talked about on the 19th was the additional surplus for 2020. Now, once Clearwater County's portion of regional waste was consolidated into Clearwater County's financial statements and all of the questions and items taken care of through the the audit process, there was $9 million left to allocate. So in the draft statements, the allocation is as follows. Core infrastructure is a new restricted surplus account, and $3 million has been allocated to that restricted surplus fund. In addition, $2 million each to the bridge infrastructure fund, the sewer fund, and the broadband fund.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Duncan.
I was just looking for a refresher on what core infrastructure would cover, which,
I think that was declining infrastructure that we may become responsible for in the future.
Any other questions? I think we're absorbing again.
Okay.
This was recently, I believe that was April the 19th that
April
we
the
went
19th.
over it, so it should be still fresh on our minds.
Yes.
So as I recall, that day we had a whole host of opportunities to have many questions. I know we live streamed that for the
Absolutely.
community if they have curiosity on that as well. So if we don't have any questions or comments, we're looking for, to the staff recommendation that council approves allocation of accumulated surplus transfers for year ending December 31st, 2020 to the identified internally restricted accounts as listed in Appendix A. Ooh, got it. Councillor Swanson?
I will so move.
Those in favor? That is carried 7-0.
Thank you. I feel like the discussion on the 19th was extremely in-depth, and there was a lot of good information and discussion that day, so thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. You put, you and staff put a very good PowerPoint presentation and description together, so it allowed for some very in-depth discussion about this.
Thank you.
That brings us to 6.2. Go ahead, Mr. Hagan.
Actually, Reeve-Laird, I would respectfully request that we defer 6.2 for the time being.
Okay.
As we have the auditor scheduled for 11 o'clock for a presentation with respect to that.
Okay,
So if it works for council, perhaps we could come back to that item.
all right. Are we good to go to 6.3? Tax rate bylaw.
We have before you the 2021 tax rate bylaw. This bylaw encompasses 4 requisitions: the provincial school tax requisition, the municipal tax requisition, seniors foundation requisition, and the designated industrial property assessment tax requisition. As was discussed at the council meeting on April 13th, the annual tax rate bylaw, the vehicle used by mainly publicly funded organizations that property owners within Clearwater County contribute to a community purse. Municipal property tax makes up, depending on the class, anywhere from 49% of the overall tax bill to, in the case of M&E, 99% of the tax bill. Many different property owners contribute to the overall purse of each organization, including Westview Lodge, education programs, both public and private through the provincial government, municipal programs and services, and the assessment of designated industrial property. Not each of these property owners use all of these programs. However, elected officials make decisions during budget which of these programs and services are more efficient or socially responsible to be provided through a public purse. With economic uncertainty and the pandemic still hanging over the heads of government officials, it makes for difficult decisions to be made to ensure community infrastructure and programs are being maintained and funded at a time when people need them the most. The requisitions from outside organizations have held steady in 2021, with the exception of the Seniors Foundation funding. This requisition increased by $30,000. Provincial education funding decreased by $20,000 because of our decreasing assessment base. Council will need to decide the municipal tax rate, and if rates hold again in 2021, this would be the third year running that rates have remained steady. Over that same period, inflation for Alberta has increased 5.2%. The bylaw attached to this item indicates rates held for the third year. Council also discussed possibly decreasing the tax rate, and the table below will show how that would affect the different classes of property. This becomes quite difficult because most properties have a blend of classes on them, and the municipal tax rates only affect a portion of the overall tax bill. The examples of what the total difference between 2020 property taxes and 2021 property taxes would be that a generalized ratepayer might see. However, this is not the case for everyone and should be taken for a generalization, not what ratepayers should expect to see for their specific property. Dollar amounts increase or decrease depending on the municipal tax rate change. So you can see in the table that we've outlined an acreage with a residence, a farm with a residence, a non-residential property with a residence, a strictly non-residential property, and an M&E property. At 0% rate increase across the board, there would be a differential of $142,962 short for in comparison to budget. We had budgeted for a $210,000 decrease in overall tax revenue, and this would be an additional decrease of approximately $145,000. The 1% decrease leaves a shortfall of just under $600,000, and then you can see the 2% and 4% decreases there. You will notice that, of course, the M&E properties are going to see the biggest fluctuation because their tax bills are made up mostly of municipal taxes. They are exempt from school requisition. And then the other properties there, as the table indicates. A change you will note to the bylaw is the addition of an additional penalty date on April 1st. It has been noted that it is easier to have a penalty date on a Friday. So the penalty dates will be after Friday, September 17th at 8%, December 17th at 4%, and April 1st at 4%. The mail date for this year's tax and assessment notice will be May 21st. This has been selected far in advance because the mail date affects the appeal date deadline.
Ms. Sherhan, just to be clear, when we look at penalty dates, that becomes cumulative, does it not?
Yes, so if you have penalty on your account, the penalty will be charged on top of the penalty amount that's outstanding.
So, in other words, if I had paid nothing on September 17th, 8%, and if I've still paid nothing by December 17th, that now is 12%.
12% total, 4% on the
That they've
December.
added,
Yep.
yeah, it just,
Yep.
it's.
Just gets added.
It adds up,
Yep.
okay. The other takeaway I have is for every 1% decrease, it's just under $600,000. So.
Well, it would be the differential between 145 and 594. So 450,000.
So for round numbers, $500,000 that we wouldn't collect in taxes for every 1%, we would
Correct.
decrease it.
Yeah.
Councillor Lougheed?
Just out of curiosity and maybe for clarification, with the penalty, is the additional penalty on the entire balance owing? So is it a penalty on top of the penalty then as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hagan?
Yeah, maybe perhaps Reeve, just to add some numbers in there, if you had $100 outstanding and the September penalty was applied, you'd now owe $112, and then a 4% penalty be applied to that entire $112 for clarity. And then again, not paid, another 4% would be applied to the overall outstanding balance. So it does actually multiply and ends up not being quite 12% because there's a compounding effect in there. Perhaps if I may, I'd just also like to remind council, in addition to the challenge of funding these differentials that were just discussed in terms of varying tax rates, just a reminder that costs continue to increase for the county. Inflationary pressures are present, and council has not anticipated any decrease in service levels overall. So that creates additional challenges as well to balance overall.
Thank you for clarifying. Ms. Sherhan? Oh, you're just ready to answer at any
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I remind our council, this will be the third year in a row that we will have zeroed it if we go down this path. I did recall the first year saying that it was the rainy day fund, and it rained. It felt like it was raining. And the next year it felt like it might have been hailing. And this year, quite frankly, it feels like we're in the middle of a blizzard with COVID and every other thing going on and the economic downturn. Our community is struggling, and we need to show compassion. While 0 is a good number, we have $12 million in the reserves for this purpose. Is this an opportunity for us to consider reducing the taxes? We do know we've had a request for that. I know that we aren't at this point looking at reducing the services that we provide. And that is, you know, in my mind, the last place we want to go at the moment. But we do have some dollars there to ease the burden. If we would like to go that route, this may be an opportunity to consider that. I also recognize, as Mr. Hagan indicated, that if you look at us zeroing this many years in a row and inflation kept going, we really, in some ways, have reduced the tax because everything, the world kept going. So this is a lot to consider, but I do ask you to give it serious consideration that we do have some reserves there to ease the burden just a bit. Councillor Swanson?
Rhonda, can you just, for clarification there on your table that you presented to us? So I'm just gonna go on the 1% decreasing column. So if the average assessment of an acreage with a resident is $375,000, they would see a decrease of $25, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just asking for clarity. That is an annual amount, correct?
Correct.
Correct. So I can understand the tough times that people are going through, but I also realize too that we have, you know, the inflation isn't going away. If anything, it's going to be coming. I don't believe we're going to see a deflation anytime soon. So there is those cost savings down the road. I think we've all realized that 3-year hiatus that the Board of Government has given our M&E in this sense, and I believe the non-residents as well, right?
Yes.
Those two categories.
Any DIP designated property is there will be no assessment growth for Clearwater County or any municipality in Alberta for the next 3 years.
Right. So going forward with knowing that those particular columns will be impacted as well, and I believe our residents want to continue on with the same service that they have been getting so far too. So while I can understand the need to have that do a decrease, I believe if we hold the line, then we can carry our services forward going that route, and we get the bulk of our assessment from those two particular classes, and so for me, it's I would just sooner us hold the line.
Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Reeve Laird. Just one more factor for council to consider as well. If council was to decide to decrease the tax rate for 2021, and then perhaps go back to where we were in 2022, that could easily be perceived as a tax increase at that point. So just one more consideration in council's deliberation.
Thank you for that clarity. Ms. Sherhan?
Yeah, I think since maybe in the last 10 years, we've had one decrease. Do you remember, Jim? No?
Ever having a decrease?
There was 1 year there was a decrease, and I know the next year was difficult, but yeah.
Councillor Duncan?
I do remember having, especially my first term, a number of discussions on this topic as well, and I think it was just maybe when I started, there was a year of decrease, and it ended up that, and I think as Councillor Swanson's alluded to, we, with inflation and everything, you tend to fall behind, even at zero. And we're, so far we're finding efficiencies, we're finding surpluses, we're getting some good pricing on a lot of our contracts or tenders that we're putting out, which is allowing us to kind of hold ourselves on a pretty even keel without an increase. But there is, at some point, there will have to be probably an increase unless we somehow start generating a lot more assessment in the county. We're certainly going to see that 3-year hiatus from an increase in assessment, especially on the industrial side. So I think it's the pain caused that could potentially be caused by an increase in the future, which could be fairly substantial if we keep, generally falling behind. Even staying at zero, we are going to fall farther behind in our ability to provide the same services we're providing, with costs going up, with inflation going up. So I would suggest too that we holding the line at zero is actually a decrease, and especially with the industrial properties that are getting the 3-year hiatus, they are getting a fairly substantial tax reduction for at least 3 years. And they do provide 90% of our tax dollars, so it'll be a significant impact to our revenues.
Councillor Lougheed?
Yes, my thought, kind of building on what Mr. Hagan had said earlier, is if we do reduce taxes this year, any increase to bring it back to the previous level would be viewed as an increase in taxes, even if it was just kind of remaining at the zero. I just wondered if, recognizing that we are kind of in an unprecedented economic downturn along with COVID, is there another mechanism we could use to access that stabilization money? I'm suggesting something along the line of a 1-year rebate that could go out to individual ratepayers at all levels. That would be a one-time. I know it was used successfully by the provincial government a number of years back and has historically been viewed as a positive, and that was a rebate check that kind of recognizes where we're at and our ability to support our community within our stabilization, but yet not affecting future taxation baselines. Just a suggestion, is there any mechanism that we could do that?
Well, and I'm gonna go to Mr. Hagan in a moment. I like the idea of where, and the thought process there, and maybe it could be linked to an incentive to pay by a certain date, I don't know. That might be an opportunity, because maybe that would incentivize paying the taxes in a more timely manner. Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Reeve Laird. Yes, I think we could provide some options, administration could provide options back to council to consider. Those mechanisms could be put in place. Council, I would suggest, would have some additional discussion and decisions to make as to, does that amount apply to all taxation classes or certain taxation classes and so forth. As well, we could do some cost estimates as to what that impact might look like for various options.
All right. Other questions or comments? Deputy Reeve Vandermeer.
Yes, thank you. I think the points that have been made thus far are all very good. I think it is I'd like to highlight again the significance of inflation over these past 3 years, of 5.2% over 3 years. And I agree with the comment that that is definitely a decrease that we've passed on to our citizens and our businesses. Remembering back to when Councillor Duncan and I were first on council, there had been I believe somewhat before that, there had been a decrease, and then they had to make it up over the subsequent years, and they struggled with very limited reserves and the perception that you had to catch up. You had to now increase the tax rates at a higher rate of increase, which was not well received. Also, industry, as we look around our county at this time, there aren't many drilling rigs out there. We also know that in the next 3 years, we will not receive any of the increase in assessment that could result from oil and gas activity. And in these next 3 years, there will be ongoing inflation. And when you look at what the federal government has done to stimulate the economy, to compensate for, as best they can, the effects of the current pandemic, there's been quite a lot of money pumped into the economy across the country. And whereas here at the municipal level, as a county, we will be seeing, and we have seen even this year, decreases in assessment and decreases in tax revenue if we were to hold at a 0% response this year. So, and longer term, we know that the oil and gas industry will be in steady decline. And given that the vast majority of our revenues come from that sector, when we have to start covering from other sources the reductions that we're going to see from industry, we will see substantial tax increases over time. So I believe it would be a mistake to decrease at this point in time. I think we're doing a good job by holding it at 0% and in so doing, avoiding the necessity to rapidly increase taxes later on.
Mr. Hagan.
Thank you, Reeve Laird. Not to complicate the challenge for council further, but another factor occurred to me. The uncertainty of the provincial government funding going forward. We all know as provincial taxpayers that the province is struggling financially. COVID has had a major impact on that. Oil prices have had a major impact as well on the economy in general. We all hope for better days going forward, but some of the indications that we've seen so far in terms of provincial budgets are pointing to a downward trend, and the county will be needing to be more self-reliant on their restricted surpluses that have been put away diligently. I anticipate we'll be drawing on those in the future so that we can maintain roads, bridges, other infrastructure, things like that. So one more consideration for council.
Thank you. I think you described well the blizzard we find ourselves in. And I go back to looking at our restricted surplus accounts. Ms. Shurhan?
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt, just, yeah, just a couple other points. Maybe on the table, because the property tax bill is a combination of your assessment times the rate. Even when you're holding the rate steady, the last few years, the residential assessment has decreased. So you will see in the 0% decrease column, where the rate is holding steady, an acreage with a residence will see a decrease in their tax bill, as would the farm with a residence, as would the non-residential property with a residence. Also, we've been talking about, you know, keeping services the same when I guess we have actually increased services with the additional paving. That puts an extra burden on the maintenance of those paved roads, not only for snow plowing, but overlays. And yeah, I think that was the 2 points I wanted to.
Nope. Thank you. These are all important items for our council to consider. What I was starting to go down the path of as well is the optics we have also to look at with regard to our restricted surplus or reserves or savings account, as it will, with the untrained eye, or, you know, the community at large, recognizing the bottom line is we have $105 million for various projects. We recognize why it's there, and I see that as, you know, quite frankly, our options as we find the provincial, I would say, weans us off of any grants in the future. This is our way of ensuring we can maintain those levels of service going forward. We have that stabilization fund. Maybe this is an opportunity to consider the rebate option. So even if we stay at zero, maybe there's another vehicle for us to consider or mode to consider so that we could find a way to ease that burden somehow. Are there other comments? Councillor Hoven.
My concern with going with any reduction in the tax is that in the future years, we're going to have a more substantial increase to get us back to where we need to be. With the talk of the province reducing grants and other funds coming our way, I think we have to be prepared to be leaner in the future, but if we have a tax decrease, we're going to lose the ability to have some options. And I look at that reserve number, or the restricted surplus. That high number gives this county and all of its residents options, and we can be flexible with things. So I'm very comfortable with seeing that nice high number in the restricted surplus, and I don't think we should be taking actions that are going to substantially reduce that. I do like the idea of the tax rebate, and one option I'd like admin to look at is just a tax rebate for every property with a home on it, with a residence. A farm quarter without any home on it is fairly inexpensive, and I don't think that needs to be touched. And I think any commercial property, it's called management then to make sure you're paying your taxes, and I don't think we should be touching any commercial properties with rebates, but it's putting a few extra dollars in the pockets of residents with homes and families and kids. I think that's where any rebate should be going to. So I would be in favor of a 0% decrease and looking at the option of a rebate from the tax stabilization fund.
Councillor Lang.
Yeah, I'm in favor of a 0% decrease. Not only do we have to be concerned about the grant funding or the decrease in grant funding coming down from the provincial level in our government in the future, but also we've seen the downloading from the government recently, like the policing, that's recent, more cost to us. And even our very own CPOs, even the tickets they write, more of that, the higher percentage now goes to the province. And so we're seeing extra costs that way, and a 0% is, we are giving out a decrease just by keeping it at 0. And there will be a reckoning even with that going forward into the future. So for me, I believe a 0% is probably the most we can do right now. But I am really interested in that rebate that Councillor Lougheed brought up, and administration bringing back some options.
Any other comments, or would we be looking at the staff recommendation that council considers granting first reading of bylaw 1107/21, and that would then make it as 0%, and then we would also, beyond that, have administration bring back information, I guess as quickly as possible, about how we would create a rebate program as a one-time opportunity. Other thoughts or comments? Councillor Duncan?
I guess I'm okay with that. I'm on board with the 0%. At this point, I'm not on board with the rebate. I think we're seeing, even like it's been pointed out, even with the 0% change in the tax rate, there is a decrease on the residential properties there already. You know, depending on the size of the rebate, it could be substantial dollars for the county, but really quite small dollars to each individual residence out there. It's a gesture, but I'm not certain. Personally, I'm not certain it's going to be all that big of a gesture, all that much of an impact to the individual residents, unless we dip substantially into our reserves to provide that rebate. But I'm willing to look at the numbers at a future date and decide on that.
Very well. Do we have anybody who would like to make the motion to consider granting first reading? So on that bylaw. Deputy Reeve Vandermeer?
I will move first reading.
Any other questions or comments? Those in favor? That is carried 7-0. Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Reeve Laird. I would respectfully suggest that council consider passing a motion to the effect to direct administration to follow up with options at a future council meeting.
That was going to be my question, so thank you for getting ahead of that. Councillor Lougheed?
I would be pleased to make a motion to that effect.
Ms. Haight, were you able to capture that? She says yes. Any other questions or comments? I do have one question. Mr. Hagan, what kind of time frame would you be looking at for administration to be able to develop information around the rebate option? Mr. Hagan.
Thank you, Reeve Laird. I'm fairly confident that administration could bring that back to the next meeting, which would be the first meeting in May.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. Those in favor? No, just a minute, I'm busy counting. 5. Those opposed? To 2. Thank you. You're right, there's reflections on here. That brings us back to 6.2. Mr. Hagan.
Thank you, Reva. Again, I would respectfully suggest that 6.2 be deferred until 11 o'clock.
Oh, gosh.
And only because I don't think we have any opportunity of rescheduling our auditors any earlier, because they have several clients in the exact same situation that Clearwater County is in, and they are making presentations at several council meetings today. So perhaps we could move on to other items and come back to this.
Thank you very much. I was looking at the clock and I read it wrong, incorrectly. How about we go to the CAO report, 7.1. Mr. Hagan, if you'd like to walk us through your report.
Sure. Would council prefer that I go through item by item or address specific questions within the report?
I'm thinking, given that we just got this a little bit later, it wouldn't hurt to go item by item. Thank you.
Okay, certainly. So the first item is economic development update. And the first sub-item within that is a virtual David Thompson Country Tourism Business Forum. Took place April 7th. 28 participants representing 23 companies. Primarily a networking session, allowed tourism operators to share information about their businesses, how they have adapted to COVID-19 restrictions, changing tourism market. Highlight was representatives from Alberta Environment and Parks sharing information about infrastructure, enforcement, messaging about public lands and parks usage. Second item within that, staff are coordinating the promotion of open farm days among local producers. Virtual discussion was held on April 8th. Participation was light with only 6 attendees. In 2020, there were 4 farms involved in open farm days. General feedback was quite positive, despite the COVID restrictions at the time. 2018, there were 8 Clearwater County farms in open farm days. Alberta Open Farm Days collaborative province-wide 2-day event that gives Albertans an opportunity to experience a farm and understand where their food comes from. It is backstage pass to meet the farmer, experience ag tourism in Alberta, taste local foods direct from the producer. This year, Open Farm Days will be held on August 14th and 15th of 2021. And the third item there, the Town of Rocky Mountain House and Clearwater County's economic development officers are meeting with real estate agencies to discuss the rise in residential real estate activity over the past few months, and an update will be provided in May. Second item in the report, the 2021 census. Statistics Canada will begin census data collection on May 3rd, 2021. To learn more about the 2021 census, there is a link provided there, and as well through social media accounts. And again, reminder of the importance of census data in the second paragraph there. Number 3, the 2021 municipal election, and attaches an update from Clearwater County's returning officer.
Councillor Duncan.
Okay. Just my question actually goes back to the economic, or the first section there on, and I maybe look to my fellow councillors that are more involved than me on open farm days. Are we, we're not seeing a bunch of farms in our community here. Are we off the beaten path? Is this catered more to, are people coming up from, Red Deer, the Highway 2 corridor more, or is this local people from, Rocky, Caroline, that are Eckville that are coming out to farms here?
Councillor Hoven.
The majority of the people that came to our farm in 2019 were from Edmonton and Calgary. So it's people from the cities looking to get in touch with their rural roots. I believe that people have become so far isolated from how food is actually produced. They think milk magically appears in grocery stores. And it's a great chance to educate people and let them experience what, the realities of where their food comes from.
So I guess having said that, I'm certainly all in favor of this. I just, it's probably not as prudent to encourage this for our western farms because they're not likely to get too many people to come traveling that far to the west side of Rocky, say, as opposed to, you know, closer out on the eastern boundaries of the county.
Councillor Hoven?
We had quite a few people who made the weekend, and they would have the route on Saturday. They would go someplace, hit a few farms, and then camp overnight, and then hit different farms on the way back home on the next day. So, you know, the closer you are to Highway 2, yes, you will probably get more people, but because you are farther away, I think you just need to do a little more promotion and link up with other farmers and try to get on a route of stops for people, and you can get people all throughout the area. We have a beautiful West Country. I can really see a lot of people making that weekend trip and camping out by Nordegg and then heading back up a different highway back to Edmonton or Calgary.
I absolutely could see the same thing as well. I think that there's an opportunity there. Councillor Swanson?
I know I participated in that particular webinar with also Councillor Hoven and Jerry, and we did ask that Jerry look into contacting the neighboring municipalities and coordinating with their possible farmers too, so that we could sync other farmers close to our municipality as well, so that way it was a collaborated effort to help do some mapping, etc., for people to come out in this area. So if they were close to northern part of Sundre or, you know, Wetaskiwin, whatever, or Lacombe, that they would have an opportunity that we could cross-pollinate, in those kind of areas, so, as well.
Well, we're trying to make it an event.
No, thank you for that information. It helps me understand it.
Mr. Hagan?
Carrying on in the report, 3 is the 2021 municipal election. Attached to the report is an update from the county's returning officer, and I see she is here with us today. If council would like a summary of the report or have any questions.
Welcome, and please introduce yourself for all of the viewing public to see. We recognize there's a smiling face under that mask somewhere. Hi. There we go.
Good morning, I'm Sabrina Walter, and I am the acting returning officer for the Clearwater County. Would you like just a brief overview of the...
I think this is an educational opportunity for anybody who is interested.
Okay.
So this is, go ahead and tell us what we may or may not know.
Okay, sounds good. So the next municipal general election will be held on October 18th. We will have an advance voting day, which will be on October 4th. This year, it's changed a little bit, and we're going to be having 2 separate voting locations. We're not going to be doing it with the town anymore. We're going to be holding at the Christensen Center. So we're trying to get people aware of that. I know in the past, you know, the Lou Soppet Center has been the center. So just trying to educate people beforehand so they know that they're going to be going to a different location this year. There's lots of information on the county's website for any prospective candidates. Nominations will be accepted until Monday, September 20th. If you would like a package, you can download one from the county's website, or you can give me a call and we can set up an appointment and I can go through that package with you. And if you have any questions, any details, clarifications, we can go through that. To date, we have received 1 nomination package, and it has been posted on our website as well. I'll be updating them as they come in every Friday. This year, new for the 2021 municipal election, we will be using a new program called Voter View. And it's a management software tool that will allow, and it manages an election list. We are setting a precedence for the province. We will be the only second municipality to use this program. And so Alberta, because it has so many different availabilities of address, like 911, legal land description, and a box number, The program is going to be specifically tailored to our municipality. So if somebody shows up and all they know is their 911 address, then we can look them up and find them. So we've also added to this program, we've been working on a project to include divisions. So there will be clarification. There shouldn't be any confusion on what division somebody lives in, because it will pop up within the program as well. This year is a little bit different than in the past. There is a potential to hold a Senate and referendum questions. We won't know until September 7th when that will come through from the provincial government. And that period is open for Senate candidate nominations from September 7th to the 20th, and it closes the same time as our nomination period. And then we will also be, if that goes forward, we will be hosting that as well. Municipal Affairs has requested a partnership with the First Nations within our municipality. So we've agreed to that. And so we will be working with them to provide voting opportunities for that Senate and referendum vote as well. School board nominations, as done in the past, we'll be hosting Ward 3 and 4 division at our polling station. And the town of Rocky Mountain House will be hosting Ward 5, just to create less confusion, as Ward 5 is the town residents, and we just thought, just to put those boundaries up, it would be better if the town residents attended the town polling station. We have about 15 voting stations set up. There will be a map posted on the county website. We will be advertising for polling officers beginning of June. And also new this year, not sure what ward or division you live in, it's been added to the tax notice, the 2021 assessment and tax notice. So you can check it out on there. That hasn't been done in the past. Just also providing that clarification piece of where people live and making sure that they're voting for the right councillor.
Any other questions or comments? I will say for sure for myself, the work that is going into this, as far as making sure we know process, where we're at, mapping, where the various divisions are, and the voters list, all of that, that is great news. It's going to reduce, we hope, a lot of confusion. So thank you for that. Councillor Lang?
Yeah, I'm just wondering with the school board nominations, if some of the voters will have to go back and forth between the Lusapa Center and the Christian Center, like with Ward 5 being with the town of Rocky Mountain House. Is there any potential for crossover there into our county residents?
Ward 5 is strictly town residents. They're not in the municipality or the Clearwater County. And so that was part of the reason why we did that, is to separate those two so they weren't bouncing from one to the other. And then, you know, the optics may look like they're double voting at two different stations. And so in order to create those boundaries, the school division is in partnership with the town to conduct that piece of it, and we will just be conducting Ward 3 and 4.
Councillor Duncan?
Does the province provide any funding for us in terms of, hall rentals for polling stations, et cetera, returning officers, especially in those cases if there's an acclamation and we don't need someone in that polling station for county business?
Sure. So even if there is an acclamation, we still will have to have a polling station open. And there's been funding approved for $2 per capita.
I guess I'm curious, and this might be a question. $2 per capita seems wonderful. What does it actually cost us to have an election? Because I assume it's more than $2 per capita.
It is. We will be, the school division pays 50% of the polling location costs. So there is shared costs there as well. Maybe Christine, if you wanted to.
Ms. Hagert.
Thank you, and I apologize, Reeve Laird and Council, I wanted to jump in and answer that question for Sabrina. We budget $140,000 to conduct a municipal election. That's a little bit up from 2017, and that's related to the voting list creation and the program to manage that software. And the $2 per capita is the grant amount the province has told us that they would, if there is a Senate and referendum, they would be providing. If there's no acclamation, if there is an acclamation within our division, the per capita goes up to $4 per capita. So there is an increased cost to us if we're using a station that wouldn't be normally used in a municipal election if it was an acclamation. And there's also some per capita cost sharing related to the First Nations vote as well. So we have, we're not sure of the grant dollars coming in, but it could be anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 to offset some of our costs for municipal election. Correct me if I'm wrong, hall to hall, we're about $200, $250 to rent the hall. And then would be the cost of staffing that for the day of the election as well. So 2, 3, or 4 polling station workers, depending on the hall itself and how busy it's expected to be.
All right, thank you for that clarity. I just
problem.
imagined that it was going to be more than the amount that the grant will be. Other questions or comments with regard to municipal election 2021? And my last understanding, there was 6 or 8 questions that the provincial government was thinking about putting forward. So it doesn't sound like if, it's just kind of what questions will be. Other thoughts or comments on that while we have the ladies here? Seeing none, I want to thank you for, Councillor Lougheed.
I guess just one curiosity question. Has there been any discussion of like a mail-in type voting thing if we're stuck in a pandemic situation? I just like what's happened with our southern counterparts, and I just wondered if there had been a discussion around that.
Ms. Hager.
Thanks, Councillor Lougheed. There hasn't been any change to legislation, but we do, as Council will recall, back in 2020, we adopted a municipal election bylaw, and we did allow for special ballots. That doesn't specifically allow for pandemic-related applications for special ballot. It only is if you're out of the voting jurisdiction or incapacitated in a way that you can't attend a polling station. I anticipated that there would be some legislative changes, but perhaps the province is hedging their bets in terms of vaccination program. I'm not sure, but I haven't heard anything coming down the line that says that there'll be an allowance for special ballots for quarantine reasons. But stay tuned. If anything changes, we'll let council know.
All right. And again, thank you, ladies, for giving us a comprehensive overview and update on, as I said, municipal election 2021. Mr. Hagan, if you'd like to finish your report, and then I think we're going to take a break.
Thank you, Reeve Laird. The last item on the CAO report is an attachment, which is a report on an update on the Justice Transformation Initiative.
Any questions on that? Looks like you're off the hook. We'll take will 10 minutes work for everybody? A 10-minute break, so we'll be back at 10:40. It is 10:41 and we have returned from a little break. And that brings us to 7.2. That is Clearwater County Broadband Project Report.
Good morning, Reeve and Council. In regards to this report, it's a short one this time. Is there anything outstanding, or would you like me to go through it all? Or any questions?
Maybe
Sorry.
just go us through like the update. It's good for everybody in the community to hear where we are on everything.
Thank you, Reeve. So the Universal Broadband Fund, the submissions, again, we did on time. And as of the 27th, that's today, I've gone over and I went to the websites and reviewed a bit. There's only actually one municipality that's been approved so far, and it's out in New Brunswick, I believe. I might be right or wrong. And then I haven't seen anything or heard anything else from Universal Broadband in any way. The open access policy, draft policy that was approved by council to go and interview the ISPs is ongoing. The interviews are going well, and I believe we have a workshop and a meeting on May 21st for a review of that, so I'm looking forward to that. Materials and electronics, I'll just fill a little bit more. We've received some servers and components, and we have other components still coming. There's a little bit of a chip shortage right now in processors and stuff like that, so a lot of the electronics are being held up. Not too bad though. I think we'll be pretty good so far. I'm pretty happy with it. Phase one, we've all our fibers deployed between Ferrier Drive and Clearwater County Office, our temp location here, which was the same as last time. The DC power is actually in progress. I'd say, I didn't write down a percent, but it's about 90% done. The optical electronics are ordered for both locations, and then back to that chip shortage again, but it's pretty good. Grounding has started on the Ferrier pop, so we have to ground it for, lightning strikes, etc. The grant, CTI grant is still under review by federal government, moved up to manager level. It seems to be in a holding pattern. I've reached out and talked to our engineers and had them sort of reach out to see if they have any ways of, pushing them or finding out more information. And it's across board that the CTI has been holding up and not being giving a lot of information. So it's not just us, it's others too. Rocky Mountain House to Olds Phase 2 is, we've put that on a pause until we talk to the ISPs and get their input on the 21st. We're still going ahead with the POP site survey and main design. I've got an update this week with the engineers on Thursday to go forward to hopefully, I think the design's very close to release for RFP. Pre-qualifications is for the construction of the fiber for the construction companies is under review, and selection is underway. So we're in that phase. The wireless projects, there's Microsoft a microwave interim solution for Nordegg and the Ferrier Tire. The RFP is under review. Tower installation is under review for the RFP, and selection is underway. We've gotten some very good pricing in there. Microwave path investigation to Nordegg has been completed, and we're looking at certain towers to lease on the way for that project that's still on pause, but we're still keeping research and going forward on that. The public notice was released for the Ferrier Tower, and that was on the last report, and it came back. We have no objections or anything, so it went well. Starlink, we're still gathering data and testing. It's underway. It's going rather well. It's still in a beta, as everybody knows. It's still in a beta test, and we do notice little ups and downs every now and then because we monitor it 24/7, and we notice that it goes down, and there's either some updates being adhered to it, or it's reacquisitioning itself. So But all in all, it's going very well, so happy with that. And that's the end of the report. Thank you very much.
Mr. Hagan.
Thank you, Reeve Laird. Just following up on Mr. McDonald's comments on Starlink, in addition to Clearwater County being a subscriber to Starlink and performing our own testing of the system, several of the staff have independently on their own signed up. And so we've asked them to do us a favor and provide some feedback to us on the performance that they're seeing. So that will be added to the data that we're gathering directly to see if it's corroborating what we're observing as well. So it's another opportunity for us for information.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. Really good.
Councillor Lang.
So Cam, just a question with this workshop on May 21st, I'm a bit confused. Is that a workshop with council or is that a workshop with the ISPs?
It's a workshop with councillors, and we're having our engineering firm come and do a presentation to you on the ISP's responses to their questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Deputy Reeve Vandermeer.
Question, you mentioned that the servers and other components are being received, but a little bit slower. Is this impacting the hookup at the knock over here at the other building? And if so, when is your projected ready date for that facility?
Go ahead.
It is impacting it a small bit. It's like when you order, your car and only one tire's missing off of it. The whole car's here except for missing one component that you probably need the most. So it's going to impact it. I wouldn't say a whole lot because we did get a pretty good jump start on ordering things. So we've done well in that. There's people waiting a lot longer than we will be. And as for the construction phase, when we put the RFP out and we get some responses to that, I'll be able to have a better information for you and actually in the timely on the dates.
Other questions or comments with regard to the broadband update? Looks like we're looking forward to other updates and our workshop.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Reeve.
All right. 7.3, Public Works Report. So I know we got these just yesterday, but hopefully you had an opportunity to look through it. We have both our Public Works directors here today to answer questions if we have them. It's great to see you both. Councillor Swanson.
I guess my question is in regards to the transfer station at the temporary site. Just a little more clarity in regard to the used oil. So typically what you said you're waiting on approval from AEP. What is, okay, and hoping that the necessary equipment, is this an above ground, below ground? What, can you give me more details about the used oil, please?
Sure. Yes, it is an above ground, so it's essentially a storage tank. I'm not entirely sure as to its size, but it's, we have to account for containment and should there be any type of spillage in regards to how that will be contained. So the barriers, perimeter surrounding the tank itself, much like you would see on any oil field site, battery site. Usually the tanks themselves have a containment buffer. So that equipment and what it will entail and how we move forward in terms of any type of spill that might occur and how we will go about moving forward in containing it should it occur. And so that's being put forward in terms of the application to Alberta Environment Parks. So now that's been sent, so now it's just a matter of time on their end as to sending that approval back to us.
Subsequent?
Go ahead.
So what do we do in the meantime?
We're not accepting oil in the meantime. We can't until such time that we do have that equipment in place.
So is there, are we sending them to someplace where they can? Is it out of our municipality to end out? I'm just asking.
Yeah, we don't accept them at any of our transfer stations. So right now, it's on the onus is on the individuals themselves in properly disposing of their oil until such time that we have that in place.
Other questions or comments? If not, I have a couple. Again, it's top of mind for everybody. Everybody's doing spring cleanup, I'm sure, as I was. Have we got signs? We signed off on Friday all of the solid waste agreements. Have we got signage ready to go for the newly named landfill? Because it's now Clearwater landfill. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's Clearwater Regional Landfill, and yes, yeah, as soon as those agreements were signed, that was on our to-do list to now move forward with getting the proper deckling on Clearwater County, obviously, signage, so that's all part of the process of moving forward and making it abundantly clear to our ratepayers and residents as to that it's no longer the Rocky Mountain Regional Solid Waste Authority, because we did still had some signage up that indicated that. So it'll be a couple months that it will take in regards to making sure we have the proof, the signage, and then getting it up. So yeah, we're moving forward in that direction, making sure it's properly labeled.
All right, thank you. I also, now that we've signed the agreements off, what work and scheduling for the projects are scheduled or underway for the Rocky site? We recognize it's got to have reclamation. What all is involved and what kind of timeline is that now?
You'll have to accept my apologies on that. I have not had a chance to read the service agreement in detail. So I don't want to speculate or give you guesstimates. I do know and understand there's some reclamation work done. What I can share with you is the fact that we'll have to determine costs associated with that, and that of course will play into how much we're able to do this year in regards to the budget we have in place, or if that potentially has to wait for next year. Once I have an opportunity, Laird, to review that agreement in its entirety, then I'll be able to, and we're actually meeting with our consultants here on Thursday as well, so we'll have that discussion with them, what entails in terms of the reclamation and the proper paperwork that needs to be submitted to Alberta Environment Parks as well. So once I have had that opportunity, I'm more than happy to answer that at the next go-around for Public Works report.
That sounds great. Just by way of reminder for our council members and those perhaps listening, that is a 60-40 split according to the new agreement, 60% for the county and 40% for the town.
Correct.
There is activity over there. I assume you're doing some cleaning up, reorganizing, that sort of thing. Every time we drive by, it looks like there is some activity there. It'd be nice to let, I guess, the folks who are listening know, what are we doing there?
So we were limited in terms of what we could do until the agreements were actually signed. And one, of course, was the asset distribution agreement. So now, if a council may recall, I believe the town they didn't ask for much in regards to the equipment they wanted to keep and so on. So our next step in activity you see there is the removal of the remainder of that equipment out of there. So your TransStores, everything basically comes out of there now, and it'll be to the best of our ability, see if we got room to place it at our north facility for the time being. We'll find somewhere to put it, but the activity you're seeing there is final cleanup, basically, in regards to any additional equipment that was still remaining there.
Thank you for the clarity. I'm going to Councillor Swanson and then Councillor Lang.
This is probably a question then for Eric in regards to the River Road intersection. It says here that your detailed design has now been completed. Could you give us a little more details of what that detailed design has encompassed, please?
Yeah, certainly. So, yeah, we're excited about coming to a solution for this Highway 11A River Road intersection. So, as council may recall, as far back as 2002, when the Clearwater County issued the development permit for the town of Rocky Mountain House for North Saskatchewan River Park, dealing with the intersection for the traffic impact assessment and coming up with an intersection solution has been a priority since 2002. So we're excited. We've been working with Alberta Transportation, Town of Rocky Mountain House, West End Husky. We've come up with a solution for an access point just west of West End Husky. So from there, west access is about 50 meters farther west before the curve. So currently, right now, we're just having in discussions with the adjacent landowners. We understand that they will be affected by the new alignment, and we want to make sure that their concerns, comments are heard, and just best to our ability to be able to mitigate some of their concerns.
Councillor Lang.
Okay, so my questions have to do with Nordegg. And I think I have 3 questions. So under the Nordegg Commercial Core, it says Site Power Engineering Consultants Limited has signed the contracts. What contracts?
So basically, the next phase in completing the commercial core was split into 2 halves, one being the underground servicing, the other one being the landscaping contractor. So as those are very dissimilar types of work, we opted to actually put out 2 different contracts, one for a site servicing contractor, one for a landscaping contractor. Site Power, sorry, I just don't have the name in front of me there, was the first RFP that was provided, and they met the contractual obligations for the RFP, and so we're gonna finalize, we're just in the process of finalizing an agreement with that utility contractor.
Okay. And so, second question, the East Access Road to go from the Quarry Road to Highway 11, did we ever come up with a date or year that an anticipated construction season for that road?
In the 10-year capital plan that I presented to council during budget, 2023 would be the construction date. So this year, we're doing all the assessments for the bridge crossing, the traffic impact assessment there up on Highway 11, doing all the preliminary engineering data. So next year would be detailed design, and then 2023 would be construction.
Okay. So that would connect with the Quarry Road is it just north of the mobile home parks or pretty much across the road?
Yeah, basically just directly east of the mobile home
Or
parks,
east.
so it's basically the last mobile home park there is the east boundary of the hamlet currently. So there is a road allowance that heads north up to the highway, and currently it would connect to the east access into the north subdivision. If I get everybody confused together here with me. Unfortunately, because of Shunda Creek, we'll likely have to move the road slightly east to get a proper alignment across the creek and avoid some of the wetland there, but that's why we're taking the time now to make sure that we have those studies in place so that we can get a proper solution there.
Yeah, there's lots of wetlands there in that area.
Yes, there is.
So-
Yeah.
Okay, third question. This Taunton Bridge, the decking and handrail system, the RFP is being advertised this week. When's the anticipated start date of this project?
Well, So I just approved the draft RFP document there to send out today. So we're hoping the RFP will close May 20th. I'm nervous due to the anticipated construction material costs in order to try to create a bridge at this time. The RFP is very open to different solutions, so wood being one solution, concrete, steel. We've made, by design, the RFP very open to many different types of solutions. You know, there are some restrictions when it comes to the dead load, what we're allowed on the bridge, as well as the live load. So we don't want to exceed for example, a concrete solution. We don't want to be overloading the structure with something that could possibly cause an issue in the future. So once we have the RFP proposals there, May 20th, we'll take a couple weeks to review what those types of solutions come back with. Providing that they meet within our budgetary requirements, we'll move forward with the solution. And if not, there's either we defer the construction for a year or come back and possibly ask for a budget adjustment in that regard. Really, it depends on our, our material pricing is really is the variable that that could put us in a bad spot.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Eric.
Other questions or comments? I have one question with regard to the road bans. How are our roads holding up now that they're coming through spring thaw?
Well, compared to last year, much better. We are definitely seeing some soft spots from the gravels. We've had done some test holes there in areas. We're seeing as much as a meter of frost out in some places. So last year at this time, we were seeing an extensive amount of damage, a lot of black dirt pumping to the surface. There was also a significant amount of activity on some of these roads that were weaker structures. So we're in better shape for some of our overall road conditions. But we're hoping by mid-May we'll be able to actually kick off with our gravel rehabilitation projects. We're really only slightly ahead of maybe where we were on any other year as the frost comes out. It's odd because we've been without snow for so long. It looks like we should be ready to go, but really the frost is, and the ground temperatures are still quite cool, and they're slowly coming back. So we're really not any farther ahead than we were any other year. It's just the optics with having no snow for so long. Everybody's itching to get going.
And thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you very much.
All right, it's a little bit after 11. I have 11:04, so we're a few minutes delayed coming back to our financial statement and auditor's report. That would be on 6.2, page 73 of 138 of our agenda. Looking for somebody to motion and authorize Phil Dirks, CPA partner at Metrix Group, participation in council's April 27th, 2021 regular meeting via electronic communications. Deputy Vandermeer, those in favor? That is carried. So, Mr. Hagan.
Thank you, Reeve Laird. I think we had some technical problems, but I think we're working through that. So in the meantime, perhaps I'll just introduce it, the item that is, and then I'll turn it over to Mrs. Serhan with your permission to speak to the financial statements from a management perspective. And then Mr. Dirks will provide observations from an audit perspective and information for council as well. So from our perspective, what I'd like to share with council is, even though December 31st, 2020 seems like a long time ago, it really isn't from an accounting perspective. When you consider the amount of work that needs to be done to pull the financial information together and end up with a product like our financial statements that are transparent, informative, and useful for the readers. And those readers are government bodies, most predominantly our citizens. It's a report card to our citizens on financially how the county has performed and how the county has safeguarded the assets that they've contributed to. In an ideal world, I would have liked to have seen these financial statements in council's hands earlier than you did receive them this week. The deadline for us to get these statements done and submitted to the provincial government by May 1st is extremely tight, given the limitations of our current financial system and so forth. And as well, this year was particularly challenging considering the additional work that we needed to do with respect to regional waste. As council is aware, and based on the recent agreements that were signed last week, the former Regional Waste Authority has ceased operations. And with that, one of the agreements in particular deals with the distribution of the net assets of that joint venture operation. So it was critical that our assumptions were valid and the numbers were reliable within the regional waste financial statements. And because we consolidate our portion, being the Clearwater County portion of that joint venture, into our financial statements, that also provided a delay for us getting these financial statements to you. So with that, I would like to say that I'm extremely proud of our staff for having met the deadline and have this prepared for council today, despite the fact council hasn't had a great opportunity to review these figures. But at the same time, administration is here to answer any questions, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Serhan to go through this financial statements with you.
All right.
Morning, Rhonda Serhan, Manager of Financial Services. So I'm going to just do a little background on the overall statements, and then I will walk through the statement of financial position and the statement of operations and accumulated surplus. Anytime you have any questions, feel free to interrupt, and otherwise I will pause at the end of each statement to see if there are questions on those specific statements. So attached to the agenda item, you found the draft financial statements for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020. And a huge thank you to Tracy for pulling everything together at the last minute there. Clearwater County, while combating the decline of the Alberta economy, still finds itself in a healthy financial position at the end of 2020. The net financial assets for Clearwater County have decreased by just under $500,000, and net tangible capital assets, or TCA, have increased by just over $10 million. Clearwater County does have a strong plan for replacement of assets, and with tangible capital assets increasing, this indicates that for 2020, Clearwater County built or purchased more assets than the useful life that it used up in 2020. As was noted during the 2019 year end, the value of the net TCAs decreased last year, meaning that we didn't quite keep up with the depreciation in 2019, but we surpassed the depreciation in 2020, which is what you would normally see. Some years there's more construction, some years less. Overall, the county's net financial position has increased by $7,319,233. This was due mainly to the use of grants from the provincial government that had been received by Clearwater County, but not used in the year they were received. I'll go through that in a little more detail when we go through the statement of financial position. A large portion of them were used to build or purchase infrastructure in 2020. This lowers our financial liabilities and increases our revenues by that amount. Operations for the year have contributed to the net increase in a number of ways. Nordegg lot sales were strong again in 2020 and continue to be strong in 2021. There still seems to be significant interest in the north development area of Nordegg, as well as the manufactured home lots that became available for sale in August of 2020. Investment income was slightly higher than expected, and well drilling taxes also were better than expected. And as you recall, 2020 will be the last year that Clearwater County will be collecting well drilling equipment taxes. Penalties are higher than other years due to the higher than normal outstanding taxes at the end of the year. Also, the net municipal taxes are higher than budget due to the higher than normal budget for allowance for doubtful accounts. Clearwater County anticipated another high year of unpaid taxes, and although the overall number of dollars outstanding for taxes is still quite high, there was less deemed uncollectible at the end of 2020 than at the end of 2019. One other item to note was the provincial operating grant that wasn't expected to offset COVID-19 related operating expenses. That leads to the expenses for the year. Expenses were higher than anticipated in the waistline for a number of reasons. A couple of them expenses due to the restructure of a regional program into a municipal program is initially more expensive than status quo. And the liability for the closed industrial cells at the landfill was recalculated in 2020. This increased the expenses in waste significantly. Fortunately, there were small savings in a number of the other departments to keep overall expenses just under budget for 2020. As was noted, Phil Dirks, a partner from Metrix Group LLP, will speak to the audit and the audit findings once I've completed the statement narrative. Any questions so far?
Councillor Lang?
Yeah, Rhonda, I'm just wondering, what is the outstanding taxes for 2020?
They are slightly less currently than what's on the statement. Actually, I think there's a note to do with that. Note 3 on page 15 of the statements shows that taxes and grants in place of taxes at the end of 2020 were $7,750,969, while in 2019 the net receivable was $3,622,017. Now, that is a net number, so you can see below how the taxes are broke out. It states a line for current taxes and then the taxes that are in arrears. So the total amount of taxes owing is more than that, but then the allowance for doubtful is subtracted from that amount to get to the net receivable for taxes and grants in place of taxes.
What page is that of the total document? Is that 87 of 138? 91?
Thanks, Councillor Holman.
Councillor Lang?
Yeah, I misread something. I thought I read that the amounts receivable were higher in 2019 than 2020. Yet it's showing differently. Yeah, Clearwater County anticipated another high year of unpaid taxes, and although the overall number of dollars outstanding for taxes is still quite high, there was less deemed uncollectible at the end of 2020 than at the end of 2019.
Right, so that's the allowance for doubtful is lower in 2020 than in 2019.
I'm looking at a different line, thank you.
Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Reeve Laird. And just an observation from a financial perspective on behalf of management. What we're seeing is that a lot of the outstanding accounts that we saw in 2019 are being paid up. And even though the balance goes up in 2020, it's all current. So the future will tell if we see that. One significant oil and gas company has fully paid up their 2019 balance now, and we're working with them on the 2020 balance. So we hope to bring further updates throughout the year to council on that. So we'll be focusing on that 2020 balance, but I think the good news in this is that we are seeing some catch up of those older amounts now.
Other questions or comments?
Okay, we'll move to the statement of financial position. So we start with the financial assets. And you can see that cash and cash equivalents are slightly higher in 2020. But then 3 rows below that is investments, and that number is lower. So the dollars go in and out of investments, and at 2020, at December 31st, there was just more money in more readily available cash investments than in long-term investments.
Any questions? Mr. Hagan.
Sorry, Mrs. Serhan, I just wanted to add another observation is what council's seeing in that change in the balances there is largely attributable to the deferral of the penalty dates in 2020. That had presented some challenges from a cash flow perspective. And so what we're seeing there is that we needed to redeem some investments in order to continue to pay the bills on behalf of the county while we were awaiting that later collection period. So with the draft bylaw that council saw today, we expect this to be somewhat normalized through 2021 again. And we should see a transfer back into investments by the end of 2021.
Thank you for that clarification. Those are the things you learn, and they become opportunities for a change in direction or a pivot, as it were, or perhaps better stated, return to normal. Ms. Shorhan?
The accounts receivable is higher in 2020 than 2019, meaning we have a higher amount still on the books for receivables in 2020. That includes taxes and trade receivables, and both of those were up in 2020. Again, because the allowance was booked lower for uncollectible, it increases your net amount receivable that you expect collection on in 2021, and the trade receivables were up as well, just at December 31st, which is a timing issue. Land held for resale is up in 2020, even though there was a large number of lots sold in 2020. There was also the addition of the mobile home parks lots in 2020. So there was lots that were taken out of land held for resale because they were sold, the cost of them, and the cost of the new lots that became available for sale went in. So the difference is the increase in 2020. And as we spoke about the investments being lower, you can see that the financial assets are relatively even when looking at the total over 2019 to 2020. The liabilities, accounts payable and accrued liabilities, again, it's just a timing difference. So the trade payables were a little higher at December 31st than they were in 2019, and as we moved into 2021, those liabilities were paid. The big change in the liabilities is the deferred revenue, and this is the due to the amount of grant funding that was used for capital projects in 2020. So there was a large portion of the MSI grants that sit in deferred revenue until we meet all of the conditions of the grant. So that includes projects that are eligible and then spent in that year. The long-term debt slowly going down as we pay off the loan for the Westview Lodge construction. And the landfill closure and post-closure cost, as noted previously, increased significantly. This is Clearwater County's portion of that liability at December 31st, 2020. And as we recalculated the landfill liability in relation to the industrial cells the closed industrial cells at the landfill. So the difference in the net financial assets is an increase due to the decrease in the liabilities, mainly the grants there. The non-financial assets, here is where you see the increase in the tangible capital assets, $10 million over the previous year, which includes amortization plus construction. So the net increase being 10 million. Inventories for consumption went up slightly. That's mostly gravel. Prepaid expenses are slightly higher, but really steady from 2019. So the accumulated surplus, you can see increased by around $18 million due to that decrease in the liability, and then with the increase in the tangible capital assets.
Any questions or comments? All right.
Okay, and onto the statement of operations and accumulated surplus. I'm going to spend most of the time in the revenue section here. That's where most of the differences between budget and actual are. So the net financial, or the net municipal taxes are up compared to budget, again, because we budgeted such a high allowance for uncollectible taxes, and in the end, it was clear that we didn't need to book that large of an allowance, so the net municipal taxes are higher than budget in 2020. User fees and sale of goods are higher due to the sales of the lots at Nordegg. Investment income is up slightly. Government transfers for operating, this is the grant that was not budgeted for from the province for COVID-19 operating expenses. Well drilling and equipment tax up against budget. And again, you won't see that any revenue there for 2021 and beyond. Penalties on taxes increased significantly to budget, and quite a large amount over 2019 actual, again due to the high amount outstanding at December 31st. The rest of the lines there are pretty similar to previous years and budget. Any questions on revenue? You can see that the total revenue is up from 2019, just over 2 million, and up over budget by 7 million. The expenses, pretty close to budget at the bottom of the line there, 57 million budgeted and 56.5 million expensed. There were some savings in public works mostly, and smaller savings in most of the other departments, with the exception of waste management, which we touched on previously, due to the increase in the liability for the industrial cell and the restructuring of the regional program into a municipal program. Sorry, I was just kind of summarizing the expenses on the statement of operations and accumulated surplus.
On page 80.
Oh, good, thanks,
Of 138.
Reeve. Yeah, thanks, Reeve. So that's in the expenses line, you can see where waste management is budgeted 2,528,000, and the expenses were 4,602,000. This will still be a bit of an unknown in 2021 as we work through being a municipal program versus a regional program.
Councillor Lang?
Rhonda, I know the expenses went up under the fire, ambulance, and protective services by a fair little bit, about 500,000 looks like.
Yeah, I believe that was the WUI program.
The WUI, okay.
Yeah. That was offset by 100% grant from the province. Is there any other questions? I also would like to note that if there's something you need more information on, there's notes next to some of the lines there saying Schedule 2 or Note 3. There's more information in the notes and schedules that are attached. Feel free to have a look at those and come back with any questions you might have after you.
Councillor Lang.
Rhonda, yes, another question. Parks and Recreation, there's a difference of about $1 million there. Do you know what that is?
Over 2019.
To 2020, yeah.
Yeah, that number fluctuates with what the town budgets for their recreation programs, because their capital is our operating. So even though their projects fluctuate, their operating doesn't fluctuate much, their capital projects fluctuate from year to year. And that would also be our portion of the, oh no, not our portion of the hub. That would be the portion, Caroline's portion of the hub parking lot that was paved. So part of that paved parking lot is on Clearwater County land, which is a tangible capital asset for Clearwater County, and part of it is on Caroline's land, which is operating costs for Clearwater County.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments, or did you want to keep walking us through it? Perhaps that's the easiest way.
I think that's pretty much all I wanted to point out, but I'm open to any other questions you might have.
I think we're all absorbing it. How do we want to proceed?
Well, we could have Phil do the report on the audit perspective for 2020.
All right, Mr. Dirks.
Hello, Phil.
Yes, good morning, Madam Reeve, members of council. Happy to be with you today. I'm just going to try to share my screen here. Can somebody give me access to share my screen?
We're working on it.
All right. This technology is awesome. I remember, well, while we're waiting here, I remember last March when this all started, some of the meetings that I was going to, and cell phones lying on tables and people, you know, we came a long way since then, so here we go. So hopefully you're looking at something that says auditor's presentation now.
We sure are.
Okay, great. So again, good morning. Happy to be with you to say a few words about the 2020 audit, give you a perspective on the audit. I think Rhonda did a great job in giving you an overview of the financial results. And I'll try to focus on more what we are doing and what our work is about, and answer any questions that you might have. So I'll just get right into it. But overall, again, this year the audit went very well. County's books are in good shape, and clearly the county is still in good financial position, very solid financial position. So good news story. Thank you to Rhonda and all the other staff for their assistance in getting the work done. As Marie mentioned, it's a little bit of a time crunch there with the waiting for the Waste Commission's or Waste Authority's results, but here we are today, and I think it's everybody should be commended for their hard work. So the auditors have been appointed to provide an opinion or do an audit of the county's financial statements. So we did send you a audit plan earlier in the winter, I think in January, that discussed various matters regarding how we would approach the audit and those types of things. So again, Our auditor's report will be attached or is attached to the draft financial statements that you have in your agenda package. The reason those are marked draft is the auditing standards don't allow us to sign the report until council has approved the financial statements. So you will see in there, our auditor's report is attached to the financial statements at the end of the day. And in that auditor's report at the top, there's an opinion paragraph. And it states that in our opinion, all the county's financial statements are in accordance with public sector accounting standards. So clean opinion, audit went very well. The rest of the auditor's report talks about various items, management's responsibility for the preparation and fair presentation and internal control, and then goes on to talk about the auditor's responsibility as well. But to summarize, I guess what I would say is the rest of the report, besides the opinion, really gives more information about what an audit is and what the auditors do. So that's all I'll say about that, unless somebody has questions. I can gladly talk about it some more. But again, a clean opinion, and audit went well. So again, maybe just circling back, provide a little bit more detail on what we provided you in the audit plan. So where we spend, or where we focus our time. Receivables, we heard from Rhonda and Murray regarding the allowance for doubtful accounts. So from an audit standpoint, the biggest concern that we will have is, is the county going to receive the receivables that are on the books, or is there potential for uncollectible amounts? So definitely discussions about that have increased over the last couple of years with, as Marie was discussing, various oil companies not paying for one reason or the other. But as Marie also mentioned, there were some collections from previous years, and even though some of your tax balances were higher, we did see payments being made after the end of the year, which definitely makes us feel better. So that's really the best evidence we can get, is cash comes in after the end of the year. Other than that, there does remain one company where there's a risk of potential loss there. So the county has taken a conservative approach and provided an allowance for approximately 60% of the outstanding balance. So that doesn't mean that you've given up trying to collect. It's just prudent to basically, I'll say, not count your chickens before the eggs hatch. I think that's how the saying goes. But anyways, so overall, we were satisfied that the allowance that has been provided is adequate at this time. So that's a key area for receivables. Inventory is also a key area. So what keeps us up at night? I'm not really losing a whole lot of sleep over any of this, but as far as land held for resale, as Rhonda mentioned, the county had a pretty strong year for sales. So I think there was, if memory serves me correctly, about $1.3 million of lot sales. Correct. So that's great. So that means that we don't have to get too concerned about whether there's a valuation issue with your land inventory. So if you had spent a lot of money developing various lots and they weren't selling, the inventory is supposed to be recorded at the lower of what the county paid for it and what those lots are worth. So when lots are selling, that gives us confidence that the county is going to realize on that $4.8 million of land inventory. The issue with gravel inventory is more about how do you count gravel inventory. So it's not like counting cars or even, well, I'll tell you, when I was much younger, I was out counting a herd of cattle, and they were moving around, so it was a little bit tough to count, but gravel is definitely a different ballgame. So how do you count the gravel pile? So the county actually hires a third party to go out and survey those pits. Is that perfect? Not necessarily, but at least it gives us a pretty good idea of whether or not what's on the books agrees with what's actually out there at that point in time. So those were done around the end of December. Payables purchases, the main concern we have in that area is completeness. Basically making sure that whatever related to 2020 got into the books for 2020. Also part of our work in that area involves communicating with the town or the county's legal counsel regarding any potential claims that might be outstanding where the county may be required to record a liability for various types of claims. So we've done that. There was no issues there. The consolidation of the waste authority in itself isn't necessarily that complicated, I guess. Our firm actually does the audit of that organization. I have nothing to do with it, but basically we end up making a consolidation entry to record those amounts, and those notes 8 and 20 in your financial statements contain information about that. As Rhonda mentioned, probably the biggest or the most significant item there was an increase in the post-closure liability. So maybe I'll talk about that a bit later when we talk about estimates again, but that's really all I'll say about that. Deferred revenue, government transfers. So there can be issues with timing of when you recognize revenue for government grants. Most of the grants that municipal clients are receiving these days with most of them, by far most of them are, have stipulations attached to them where you're going to get some money, you have to do this or spend it on that, or even MSI for that matter. You have to provide projects, and then when you provide those projects, the revenue is recognized in the year that those costs are incurred. So that's really what we're concerned about there, making sure those items match up according with various agreements and approvals and those kind of things. Thankfully, most of the rest of the county's revenue is doesn't have a whole lot of complex revenue recognition criteria to it, so that makes our job a little bit easier. Tangible capital assets, obviously spend a lot of money on capital projects last year. Biggest concern we have there is making sure that things that are going into the asset accounts meet the definition of an asset, which is primarily going to be, does it have a useful life of more than 1 year? Those kind of things. So not only looking at invoices and so on, because sometimes the invoices don't really provide too much detail, but talking to county staff about what the nature of the work was and so on. So get down and talk to engineers and then those kind of people. Taxes, really nothing too complicated about that, other than it's a big number. So thankfully it's pretty easy to audit. Go back to the tax bylaw and the assessment and do the math. That really just ties into the receivables though. Again, the question again becomes, is there anything in there that's going to be a collection problem? So overall, those are our the areas where we spend more of our time, areas of focus. I think I'll just maybe go on and talk about a few items in the audit findings report that you should have also in your agenda package. I won't go through the whole letter in detail, but I'll give you the highlights. So the auditing standards in Canada require us to report back to council on various matters. So these are the items that are required. So we didn't find any significant control deficiencies during our work. The auditors are also supposed to comment on qualitative aspects of the accounting, unusual accounting practices, policies, those kind of things. So pretty standard accounting policies and practices for municipal clients. There was some estimates made, and those are laid out in the document, but I'll just maybe refresh your memory there. The allowance for doubtful accounts, doubtful taxes, so I talked about that, a little bit more detail on that. The landfill closure, post-closure, 5.9 million, definitely that estimate really is very subjective, depends on many things, and is a best guess or a best estimate at this time. So there's many items that go into that estimate. Amortization of capital assets was 20 million, and then gravel inventory was about 4.3. So those are the more significant estimates that are being made. Estimates, why do we care about estimates? Definitely when you have estimates, it increases the risk of material misstatement because there can be bias in those estimates and those types of things. So we have to scrutinize all those items. So the less estimating, the better from our standpoint. As far as material misstatements goes, there was no material misstatements. Generally speaking, during an audit, there's going to be a few uncorrected misstatements Those did not amount to anything that was near materiality from our standpoint. So again, the auditor's report says the financial statements are not materially misstated. Why do we have materiality? If we didn't have materiality, audits would take probably a year or two to complete. We'd be basically out there all year auditing. So materiality is basically a buffer zone where there could be some there could be some misstatements, and as long as those are not material, the auditor can provide a clean opinion in the interest of keeping things cost effective and timely. Other than that, we didn't have any significant difficulties during the audit. Again, audit went well, so obviously that is a team effort, and from our standpoint, depends a lot on the client. So again, thank you to county staff, Rhonda, and everyone else for answering questions, getting information, and definitely is a lot of work involved that is hard to quantify. We will be issuing a management letter to the county on various other matters that we feel that may warrant investigation or follow-up, but there'll be nothing in there that would be serious in nature, and you're definitely more than welcome to read that once we've issued that letter. So again, I think that is basically things from my perspective, or our perspective. Definitely the county is probably in a pretty enviable financial position compared to a lot of municipalities, and the books are well looked after. Again, clean audit report, and really no issues to report as far as the audit findings report goes. So I will open it up to questions if there were any questions for me.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Dirks? You're very thorough, so and Ms. Shorhan and Mr. Hagan were definitely thorough ahead of that as well. So I think any of the questions we had have been addressed.
Okay, well, that's great.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Dirks, for your presentation. Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Reeve Laird. Just one last item I just want to make sure council is fully aware of is that the reserve transfers that were approved earlier this morning are fully reflected in these financial statements. So by approving these statements, it's a comprehensive closure to 2020.
Very well. Okay. If we have no other questions or comments, looking for a motion to approve, that council approves Clearwater County's 2020 audited financial statements as presented. Councillor Hoven? Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Mr. Dirks. Thank you, all staff. I recognize this was a group effort.
Thank you. Good talking to you.
Take care. All right. That then allows us to bounce back to 7.4, the fire chief report. Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Reeve. I have no specific information to add to this report, but if there are any questions, I would be happy to pass those on.
I think it's being very thorough. It is unfortunate that the various award recipients, it'll be nice to get back to when we can celebrate these milestones. It's nice to see that they're still continuing, but I think we could do a better job of celebrating these moments when we're not having all of these restrictions. We recognize the need for the restrictions for health purposes, certainly in light of what's going on in the municipal, regional municipal of Wood Buffalo, declaring a local state of emergency as of yesterday is my understanding. So we understand what's going on there. If there's no questions with regard to that report, that takes us to councillor reports. I'm going to start at the other side of the room for a change. Councillor Swanson.
All right. I was part of the AUMA Spring Conference, very good notables in regards to updates on municipal election and other. I enjoyed listening to their bear pit questions as well, so that was good. Of course, we had our CAO interviews now finalized. I participated in the Rocky Chamber Luncheon. They are launching a new app called David Thompson Trails. It's called Eat, Shop, Play, Live, Work, and Stay. And what it is bringing awareness to our area. If you come into the county, for example, and if you say, I would like to know where to eat, it will bring up all the businesses that would say where to eat. There's different levels that the businesses can participate in. And so if you just want to advertise your location and at times you're open, you can do that in your menu. If you want to offer specials, you can have the chance to offer that as well. This should be live in the next couple weeks, but it's a really a great engagement tool for people coming into the area that may not be familiar with everything that's going on. So I would encourage anybody to please reach out to the Rocky Chamber, as this is their initiative. And I also participated on Friday with the Cape member engagement update, which again, excellent speakers. It was great to hear from MP Blaine Calkins, as well as the Mick Sweeney report as well. So that's all I have.
Any questions for Councillor Swanson? All right, thank you. Councillor Hoven.
It's been a busy 2 weeks since the last council meeting, but I've got no specific information to report.
Thank you. Councillor Lang.
And I have no committee reports.
Right. Deputy Reeve Vandermeer.
Yes, thank you. Of course, the biggest thing of the last couple of weeks is the time we spent finalizing the ICF and waste agreements on behalf of the county. Also very significant, southern part of the county, I attended the meeting of the Caroline Ag Society, and we have a new chair there at the Caroline Ag Society, Tracy McNutt, and we're starting off with good energy and working on any of the outstanding issues relative to staffing and assignments there. So it's looking pretty good. Also, of course, attended the AUMA Spring Conference and the recent CAPE member engagement session. I also attended the Shiloh Historic Society as an information item, and it was interesting as well. So a busy couple of weeks. That's all I have to report.
Any questions for Deputy Reeve Vandermeer? Seeing none, Councillor Lougheed.
Nothing to report as far as committee work, but I just thought it's an interest to council. As I look out my kitchen window, I see activity at the former Condor Elementary site, which has been, the school name has been chosen as the Charlotte Small School, so that will be in complement to the David Thompson High School. So
Charlotte Small School. All right. Thank you for that update. Any questions for Councillor Lougheed? Seeing none, Councillor Duncan, I know that you put a written document to us. would you like to do any highlights off of that?
Yes, I will get to that. Perhaps I will just mention a couple of other items before that I neglected to put on that. The FCSS continues to function as, per its mandate, and most of our funds have been allocated for this, for 2021. We'll have some more applications come forward, but our funding is down to, I think, around 40,000 left of our 300 and some thousand that we allocate each year. I would also bring to council's attention, there are 2 weed workshops scheduled, April 28th, which is tomorrow, and May 5th from 12 till 1 p.m. These are virtual sessions, and by attending those, you do qualify for a 10% reduction in chemical sales that you purchase from the Ag Services Department there. So some information will be coming your way on that. Or if you attend those on either beaver workshops, living together with beavers in the environment, and some mountain pine beetle data can be obtained at those workshops. I was somewhat distressed to hear that some of the infrastructure put out by Alberta Environment Parks along the Highway 11 corridor was vandalized quite a bit this winter. So that's very unfortunate. Those were a bunch of toilets and stuff put out there, and I don't know the extent of the damage. It's being repaired, I believe, but that certainly is hard on budgets. Takes a bunch of time as opposed to moving forward with new projects to deal with some of that out there that does occur. The other item is covered in quite a bit of detail in my written report, which is the NSWA board. My apologies, even though the AGM is not coming up till June of 2021, there is a request from the board that any application to be a director on that board be in by the 1st of May. So that's the kind of the extent of my report there, where I outlined, what I think are good reasons that we should continue in that role. The NSWA board, if we wish to continue with the directorship there, it's a requirement that the county, we send in the nomination form by May 1st, and it's kind of in the county's name. We are able to appoint whatever member of council we would like to be the member on that board. So right now we are covered until our organizational in the fall. My name is there, but we do have to make a decision if we can on whether we would continue that directorship for another 3 years. And this is an application that would go forward to the AGM for one of the 4 municipal positions, which are all up for renewal at the June AGM. So we may or may not be elected there. It's a county that's elected, and if elected, I would continue in the position till at least October at our organizational. So I don't know if there's questions on my report on how that works, or otherwise I respectfully ask that if council would consider making a motion to that, and I could make sure that the appropriate documents with the nomination form and a letter either signed by the Reeve or interim CEO could go forward with that as well.
Well, I know for me, I see value. We are the headwaters of that river. It's important to our communities downstream, and certainly to Canada. So I see our participation on that board as being incredibly valuable, and I appreciate your willingness to continue on, and I think that we do need to have that representation. Deputy Reeve Vandermeer?
Yes, I'm quite prepared to make a motion that we continue to be represented on that board and apply for directorship.
Other thoughts or comments? Seeing none, those in favor? That is carried 7-0.
Thank you very much, Council. Most of our funding goes toward the operations of the staff, except that all the work done by the board is generally through grants there, but it does really help the board function. That the capital or the per capita contributions we make from Clearwater County is much appreciated, as well as the help we give in the extras for celebrations or West Country tours, etc. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. For myself, attended a number of meetings. The highlights, I would say, given we had a senior housing meeting, we still have a high level of vacancies in Westview Lodge. COVID is still having quite an impact on the way we see lockdown happening, so it's a lot to overcome that at the moment, regardless of how we advertise it. We do see the COVID restrictions easing, we believe, in the future due to vaccinations. That remains to be seen, but we are ever hopeful. The exterior timbers and whatnot, we are finding a solution and getting ready to do an RFP on that as we move forward. Attended the AUMA Spring Caucus, Leaders Caucus, and found that very helpful and beneficial. Very last minute invite came from MLA Nixon's office on Friday morning with regard to Tour Alberta. It's a flight, a group of pilots that do, I'd say, 3 circuits, northern, central, and southern Alberta. We are in the central, and the intent is that July 10th, weather permitting, we will see them come to our community. And the hope is that we would be able to coordinate other activities that would complement that particular event. Again, very dependent on where we are with COVID. The highlight literally was Friday. Folks, I am so happy to report to you, as you probably saw on the live stream, on Friday we signed all 4 solid waste agreements, the Community Support Services Agreement, and hallelujah, the ICF, the Intermunicipal Collaboration Framework, which was mandated. So we scooted a little bit past the finish line for the deadline, but we got it done. And it's my understanding from staff that it's already been reported back to the provincial government, and they are pleased to receive it as well. Mr. Hagan, that's my understanding? Mr.
Yes,
Hagan?
that's correct, Reeve.
All right. So that's all very good news for us. There was a little photo op that we had with Mayor Rimmer and Mayor Burke and myself. We did that here in this council chamber, so very happy to have that concluded. All right, that is my report. If you don't have any questions, we then can move on to item 7.6. We have our councillor remuneration attached. Yes. So we're just looking for a motion to accept all reports as presented or receive them as presented. Councillor Swanson. Those in favor? That is carried. And thank you for the reminder, by the way. That takes us to correspondence 8.1. Mr. Hagan, would you like to walk us through the correspondence?
Certainly, Reeve. So the first item of correspondence is from the Confluence Heritage Society, thanking Clearwater County for their contribution toward hiring a seasonal supervisor for the historic site. The second item is from the town of High River with respect to coal exploration public consultation. Information for our council's consideration there. Third piece of correspondence is an outgoing letter from this county to the Ministry of Culture, Multiculturalism and Status of Women, and has bearing on the Soquin Friendship Center Cultural Days Grant Program application letter of support. And similarly, the fourth item, also with respect to the Soquin Friendship Center, letter of support for grant funds.
Any questions or comments with regard to the 4 correspondence letters that we have? If not, we're looking for a motion to accept the correspondence as information. Councillor Duncan, those in favor? That is carried 7-0. That brings us, I'm going to just double check that we have everything else covered off. Yes, we do. That brings us to notices of motion. Do we have any notices of motion? Okay, if there is none, we will move on to, and this is a landmark moment, folks. It seems like it's been a long time since we've been able to adjourn this close to lunch. Again, I want to thank administration for your continued efforts and support. For the folks out there in viewing land, you can find today's council meeting highlights and video posted on our website. And by way of reminder, our next regular council meeting is scheduled for May the 11th. Tomorrow, April the 28th, marks every year Alberta's Day of Mourning, to pay our respects to and remember the thousands of workers who have been killed, injured, or suffered illness because of work-related incidents. Sadly, Alberta lost 150 people to workplace injury and illness in 2020. We can all do our part to make a difference by making our workplaces safer. And that is always our intent. Everybody goes home. We also recognize that COVID-19 continues to challenge our world, our country, our county, our community. Vivian Green once explained that life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning how to dance in the rain. And truly all trying to learn how to dance in this rain. Please, folks, take appropriate precautions and stay safe. It is 12:02. I'm looking for somebody to motion adjournment. Councillor Duncan, those in favor? That is carried.